one of my favorite quotes in the whole wide world is an Einstein quote. Now, this could be a paraphrase. I don't know.
All right.
I'm assuming it's a quote. It's, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast, brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. Yes, we not only develop and train people for some of the biggest brands in the world how to prepare and deliver truly effective presentations, but we also organize and host the largest presentation skills conference in the world called Present to Succeed. I'm Boris, the founder of 356 Labs, and your host for today's episode. And with me, I have yet another incredible guest from our industry. Stephy Hogan is, as she describes herself, 2 parts designer, 2 parts developer, 3 parts perfectionist, all right, and 1 part impatient mother. She is a UX UI engineering supervisor, vice president of the Presentation Guild, and today we're going to be talking about one of her favorite topics that she is a little bit tired of. And we haven't talked about that topic, by the way, on our podcast. That topic is about accessibility. Steffi, super happy to finally have you on the podcast. Let's talk about the topic that's so near and dear to your heart that now you need a break from it.
It is. It's, you love something and you go completely gung-ho on it and you dive right in, and sometimes you just need some air. And right now I need some air because I think I tire myself out by saying, is it accessible? Let's change this because it needs to be accessible. And I know other people get tired of hearing me say that, but sometimes they need to understand that I also get tired of hearing myself say it, but it's important. So I do it anyway.
Yeah, got it. Before we jump into that topic, which is obviously a very important topic, or at least it somehow became super important in the last, you correct me here, but probably 5 for a little bit more years. At least it became super popular in those few years. Tell us how you ended up in the presentation industry. Everyone has a crazy story about how they start working in the presentation field. So what was your case? Like, what happened?
Oh, it's also crazy. So what had happened was I was actually going to be a chemist. I was going to be a professor of chemistry. That's what I was going to do with my life. Dr. Steffi, me.
Right.
And I was in grad school and I hated it. And I actually got kicked out of grad school. And then I just kind of, after being listless for a few weeks, went into this nonprofit. They basically ended up giving me all their design work after I had done a design thing one weekend. And for the next umpteen years, I fought my way really hard to be a designer, like the design snob kind of designer, working in Adobe, doing all the really cool stuff. And then in the middle, 12 years into that struggle, actually, of trying to be accepted as a designer without any design training, my boss had made me the lead of a new team, which was awesome. And I thought I was going to be the lead of a design team. Well, I was, but it was the presentation team. And of course, I was in that mindset of the designers who look down on PowerPoint. And I'm like, come on, why?
Really?
No one wants to work in PowerPoint. Please don't make me do this. I was dragged kicking and screaming into it. And then they sent me to the presentation summit back in 2013. That was the first time I had attended. I didn't know there was any kind of conference at all around presentations. And that is what got me hooked. That is what made me love my career and really learn to accept all the pieces and all the skills that go into making presentations. And ever since then, it's my jam. It's what I love doing.
Everyone has this crazy story. Everyone has it.
No one thinks I want to be a presentation designer.
Yeah. By the way, that's true. No one thinks that. I think, at least from our designers here, nope, nobody. But they ended up loving the experience, because they see how important the role is and how much like how big of an impact the work they produce has for somebody out there.
Yes.
Maybe one person, but once you change his or her life, everything changes.
Yeah.
Anyway, accessibility. What a topic. What is accessibility for everyone who is listening, watching, whatever? Let's start with the basics. Like, what is accessibility? Why is it important? What's going on?
So accessibility is making your product, your design, your whatever it is, making it as good of an experience to use for everyone. It's not the same experience. It's never going to be the same experience. That's impossible. But each experience is as high quality as the other. So, a blind person experiencing a presentation has just as impactful and good of an experience as a person who can hear, who can see or hear, or, that kind of thing. So that's what it generally means. We're making sure we're including everyone and no one's kind of left behind from that impactful, amazing experience you're making, or talk, presentation, website, anything. That's what it is in general. Why is it important? Because we don't want to leave anyone behind, of
Yeah, I
course.
think that the first part of the answer you gave more or less explained the second part.
Yeah. I was like, wait, what? There was another
Important. I
question
think
here.
I think it's now clear. We don't want to leave anyone and just create
No.
a presentation that just a few of us can consume, or just a few people from the audience can consume. All right. So, by the way, what's your opinion back on this when we started to talk about this right now? Like, what's your opinion? When did this topic became what it became right now? Because now it's like everyone, at least the biggest organizations out there, are very much into the topic, right? They're
Oh,
very
yeah.
much. Yeah. So what happened? Like, when did it all start? If you
I think, yeah, I think that you're about right. About 5-ish years ago is when it really started to take off, and you really started to find, there's the Domino's Pizza website case. People who couldn't access the information there easily if they had a color blindness or
yeah,
we're using a screen reader to navigate or anything.
yeah.
And there was a big lawsuit around it. Like in the 5 years ago, the lawsuits around 508 compliance and accessibility just took off because people
Wow.
are more aware and everyone is starting to understand that you're leaving people behind. And it's not cool.
Yeah, it's
So,
not
and
cool.
there are actually tons. I know in the United States we have a lot of laws around it. It's the 508 compliance laws and other ADA and all those other things, but they all can result in fines and loss of business and everything. And I don't know what it is in other countries, but I'm getting pretty familiar with the standards in the States. But yeah, people are recognize it. First of all, big companies, of course, don't want to be sued.
Of
They don't
course.
want to have to pay out when the fines are more that would cost more than what it would cost to fix the problem. Um,
Which means that
and
the
then
fines are quite huge.
yeah, it's up to in the States. It can be up to $150,000 per violation. So it's
Whoa.
not just one overall fine; it's per violation. So yeah, it can add up really quickly. Um, and I think now that we've been all working from home more and we've all been digital for now a year or so, it's really in the spotlight. It's just like honed in. And now everybody is really starting to see where things are not accessible and what different kinds of accessibility issues there are. They're really
Mm.
starting to see it more. So yeah, it's been fascinating watching it. It's also been cool seeing a lot of companies really take on the issues with accessibility and starting to address that and building it into their brands and how they handle stuff.
Yeah. So who defines that? Like,
Ooh.
who has? Is it the government that defines some standards? What's
Well,
the state? What's the state there?
There is, I think the main one we tend to go by in for digital stuff, and it started
Mm,
out as just web stuff, is the W3C. I always mix up the letters and numbers consortium. And it's accessibility standards for websites,
mm,
with regard to font sizes, color contrasts, reading order, hierarchy, that kind of thing. And now we're discovering, that is a fantastic basis to pull into any digital product, not just a website. So in
yeah,
websites and apps, presentations, digital ads, it applies to anything digital. And that's where we always pull our stuff from, is the guidelines from the W3C consortium and the WCAG 2.0 standards. It's all very it feels weird saying it. WCAG 2.0 or 2.x. And it's a long eye bleeding list to like, it's boring. It's really boring to read,
yeah,
really boring, but really detailed guidelines that can help you set everything up for success when it comes to accessibility.
yeah. Any examples before we jump into the, let's call it a little bit more the practical part of the podcast for everyone who is going to be listening and saying, so why would I care? Just tell me how to fix it. you
Yeah.
know, before we jump into that, any successful examples of accessibility content on top of your mind, like anything that people can see on the web or
Oh
in the
gosh.
presentation context or anything like that? Like, is there anything? We
Oh,
can go back to this question again, like if you want.
we might have to. There's specific examples. I mean, I know Microsoft has amazing guidelines on their website with regards to accessibility and inclusion, and they follow it very well throughout their, all their stuff. It's Microsoft, and you kind of hold them to higher standards, and they do a
Yeah.
fantastic job. I think it'd be more, it's more interesting to explore the examples of really crappy accessibility,
Hmm.
um, so you can really see it. Like, when you're using something, you can tell if the usability is sucks, but you might not be able to put your finger on it. But there are a lot of places that fail accessibility, especially visually.
Hmm.
You look at it and you're like, I can hardly read this. The type is so tiny and it's light gray. That's an accessibility problem. Also applies to your slides.
Yeah.
And brand colors. There are some brands that have very challenging brand palettes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything that
Well,
ugly quickly there.
yeah. Oh, I can't. Yeah, I can't think of specific awesome examples, just because those are the ones you look at and it just works. So you don't really make note of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Microsoft, though, indeed are one of the companies that I believe is pushing that market, or I don't know, approach to design
Hmm.
tremendously. Like, and I believe they were probably the first to kind of go there, in a very bold way, like all
Hmm.
in, more or less, on everything. And everything that we probably are going to talk about in PowerPoint, I think they're really trying to first enable people to create such type of content, but then
Hmm.
they themselves, as you said, they themselves are pushing themselves for each and everything that they're creating, including, by the way, I now remember that even for conferences, when I was at Ignite, that was a requirement. Like for the speakers, your slides should have been accessible, otherwise you're not approved, right? So that
Nice.
was one of the, and that was, to be honest, now I if I go back, this was 2016.
That's
That-
awesome.
yeah, that was 2016, and they were requiring all of the slides to be accessible. And then at 2017, I think there were even people who were simultaneously translating the content for people who are on the front row, with
Yeah.
some just issues. How do you call this? Like, uh, when are there people are not able to hear very well, how do we call this in English correctly? You will get the word for sure.
Oh, the subtitles,
No, I mean,
closed captioning.
just the plain and simple, the issue which people have. Like, how do you describe this? Like, is it some type of, what type of, how do you call this when you have, Jesus, that's stupid, when you're not able to hear well, and that's That's
Hearing impaired.
exactly all right. Yeah,
Yes.
that one. Got it. So I remember that there were people from Microsoft that were obviously hired for the event
Oh,
that were helping, and that was not part of the brief to the speakers. But then once you see that there are people like that in your room, you're like, okay, wait, that makes me, even though these are two or three people in my case, for example, that completely changes the way you deliver the presentation, because it's not fair, like you have to do it for everybody. And
yeah.
so one of the things that, for example, I did was to slow down tremendously, because I saw how the
So the
presentation
interpreter
started.
could
Yeah,
keep up. Yeah.
yeah, how the person who was there for translating and just doing all of that was approaching, looking at me, looking at the slides, and I was like, "Ooh, I need to slow down here, because otherwise that won't work for them." Anyway, yeah. So Microsoft, good example. Kudos to Microsoft for that one. Let's talk about the practical part. Everyone is asking, so what? Steffi, so what? How can I make my presentation accessible if they ask me to do it, or if I get so pumped after this podcast that I want to explore that world? What's going on in the world of PowerPoint,
Yes.
let's say?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So first of all, even if
Start with
you
the
hear this,
basics. Start with the basics.
start with the basics. Well, basic before for the slide stuff, but before I get into that, when you are an advocate for accessibility, it's an important job.
Yeah.
So learning how you can do this and teaching it is fantastic, and always be an ally for accessibility. Okay, so how can we do it in our presentations? Now, there are so many different things. Let's see. Let's talk about color first, because if you hit on the visual, uh, 80% of the impairments that people have tend to be related to visual things.
Yeah.
So, the most impact will be the visual. So, that means you have to have um, this is where the challenging brand palettes come in.
Hmm.
All right. So let's say you have text. And I mean, who puts text in their presentations? Like everybody. Um, Whatever background it's on, there's this contrast ratio, and you don't have to calculate it yourself. There are great online checkers. You just need hex values in it. You press a button, it says ding, it passes, good job, or boo, it doesn't, and it'll suggest an alternative. So the magic number for color contrast ratios is 4.5. And I can send you some links for show notes or whatever to have
We can link it
these
up. We'll
checkers in
link them up.
there. Oh, also, how could I forget this? The best thing that has ever happened to my workflow for checking color contrasts is Bright Slides plugin. The Bright Slide plugin from Bright Carbon, there's an accessibility color checker in there, and you push a button and it takes all of the theme colors that are programmed into that template, and it runs it through, and it shows you which ones pass and which ones fail, and it makes the job that takes me like an hour, 10 seconds. So that's fantastic. Color's important. Like, you don't want to have blue text on a green background.
Yeah.
That's really hard to read. And usually your gut can say, that's kind of hard for me to read. It's really going to be hard for the audience to read. Other things in color include, okay, black text on a white background. It's really high contrast, right? It's clear, everyone can read it. But if you do pure white on pure black, or the opposite, pure black on pure white, the contrast is so extreme that there are people who have issues reading it. There's a thing called Irlen syndrome, and people who have that experience text that will dance on screen, on the page, on the screen, if it's pure white and pure black mix. So,
Wow.
a nice dark gray on a white is wonderful.
Interesting.
So let's see, those are the big points in color, I think.
All right.
I should probably do something like open up the thing I was working on to have a whole list of stuff.
All right.
Let me pull this over here so I can put you all next to each other on my
Who won't
screen.
cut that? This is, by
Oh,
the way, for our marketing person. Don't cut that. Don't cut that.
put you all on my screen here.
What else?
Color, right? I'm developing context to that. I'm developing the most accessible template I've ever created in my whole life is happening at the time of this recording. And in those templates, I always include helper slides with instructions and stuff. And this one has a whole section on accessibility tips. For color, we've got color contrast. Another good thing with color, and this is kind of a color, it applies to a lot of things. So color can't be the only thing you use to convey information. So by that, I mean, if you have a link in the middle of your text and the link is blue and the text is gray, and that's great, but you don't have an underline, that is an example of only using color to convey that's a link. So no one's really going to think that's a link, I should click on it, right? Use an underlined piece of text that is blue, that is the standard accepted since the beginning of the web kind of link thing. And that's a good example of using more than just color to demonstrate the information. A lot of times in tables with numbers for finances, we can use red to indicate negative numbers, right? But if we just use red and don't include the negative sign or maybe a down arrow or caret or something next to it, people aren't necessarily going to pick up on it if they have some kind of color blindness. Right? And then let's see. You have to be careful when you're using a gradient background and then you put text on it. So let's say,
Why is that the case?
So it's not that you can't do it. You just have to be cognizant of the colors you're using in that gradient. Let's say I have white text and I know that it works on dark gray. I know that it works on dark blue. And I know that it doesn't work on yellow.
Right.
So we have gray, blue, and yellow. If my gradient, it goes from blue to yellow, and I have white text stretching across that gradient, it'll look fine on the blue part, but it won't look fine on the yellow part, right? So you have to be careful what colors are in your gradient behind your text.
Yeah.
Speaking of text, once you establish the acceptable color combinations for your presentation, so using that color contrast checker, you know which colors work.
Yeah.
Once you know which ones are acceptable, then your text can pretty much be any size and still pass those color contrast tests. But it gets so complicated. If you have a color that doesn't pass that test, it might pass if it's like a 72-point font, but it might not pass if it's like 7-point font, right? Yeah. So just things to keep in mind, be aware of. Yeah. And the important thing with accessibility is you don't have to get it all right on the first try. You don't. As long as you are making an effort to make it better, you're going to be okay. So if someone comes and says, I want to sue you because it's not accessible, you're like, look, we have this whole initiative going on. We're making improvements. Then a judge would be likely to say, I'm not a lawyer, I don't give legal advice, but a judge would be likely to say, okay, they're trying. We're not going to fine you. Just keep up the good work.
Help them.
So, okay, accessibility, it's not just about visuals, right? We have cognitive issues. Some people have cognitive disorders. So use clear and simple language. One of my favorite quotes in the whole wide world is an Einstein quote. Now, this could be a paraphrase. I don't know.
All right.
I'm assuming it's a quote. It's, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So if you understand your topic well enough, you can explain it to an audience in a simple manner. And it's better that way. Use plain, well, for lack of a better word for my non-English speakers, for the English speakers, just use plain English. Simple language, simple and clear. Let's see, when you're creating links in footnotes or within your text or however you're doing it, the part that is the link should never be click here, right? You should say, visit this webpage to learn more about, and that whole sentence can be a link. It's more descriptive. And when a screen reader comes through and reads it, it will read the link. And if you have a whole bunch of click here, click here, click here, people don't know where they're going to end up. But if you have a descriptive link, they know which one to choose.
Yeah. Should we switch to something that's not in the visual part? Because the visual itself can be like, well,
Yeah.
Even though I think it will be super cool to mention, to keep it super practical, probably it will be super cool to mention what's going on inside of PowerPoint with the so-called accessibility checker, because that one is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
let's go there.
the accessibility checker is fantastic. There are a couple ways to get to it, but when you have the program open now, it's at the very bottom in the little status bar at the very bottom. It says accessibility, and it will either tell you it's great or you should investigate something. But if you click on that, it'll bring up the accessibility panel.
Yeah.
And it'll give you all kinds of information in here. Most of the time, you'll have warnings. And warnings are just mean that you should probably check it out. It's not necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
Reading order always comes up in the warning panel. And that is on a slide, you've got title, content, footnote. And as a screen reader goes through, it should read first the title, then it should read the content, then it should read the footnote. But if your slide layout is a custom layout, or people have been messing around with the boxes as they design, the reading order could get out of whack, and it might read the footnote first and then the content and then the title, and then people will get really confused when they're listening to the readback. To fix that, it's a little counterintuitive. Where you fix it is in the selection pane.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, you can go up to home and then arrange show selection pane.
Yeah.
And the screen readers read things from the bottom up, not from the top down. Intuitively, you'd be like, it starts at the top and works its way down, but it doesn't. It goes from the bottom up. So that means your title has to be on the bottom, and then on top of that, your content, and then on top of that, your footer. Things I generally do with things like slide numbers, I put the slide numbers on the very bottom so that as the screen reader's going through, it'll say slide 1, then title, content, and such. And you also have to be aware of what items are on your slide that you don't necessarily want a screen reader to read.
Okay.
And those items, you can mark them as decorative.
Yeah.
So in that, if whatever item you don't want the screen reader to read, you right click on it, choose edit alt text, and then there's a nice little checkbox that says mark as decorative. You just check that off, and then it won't be read out loud by a screen reader, which is great if you have a whole lot of working parts and just like a diagram or whatever. Let's see, what else is in this accessibility checker? Okay, missing slide titles. The accessibility will tell you whenever you don't actually have a title that was put into the title placeholder. And this particular situation has changed the way I work completely, because I used to use the blank slide layout all the time when I was making the really fancy presentations for, stage and keynotes and stuff like that. And then I learned that, well, inherently the blank layout does not have a title, which can cause problems. So I rarely use the blank layout anymore. It's very special one-off things like a full picture on a slide and that's it, that kind of thing. So it will warn you in the accessibility checker if you have slides that don't have a slide title. It will also tell you if you have duplicate slide titles, and that means you might have 2 slides with the exact same title, and Microsoft encourages you to name each slide differently, and that makes sense. So it helps everyone kind of know where they are in the presentation. If suddenly you're on, a slide called reading order and a slide called reading order and a slide called reading order. You just don't really know where you are in the navigation in the hierarchy. It will definitely tell you if you're missing the alt text for images or icons or graphics and things like that. So here's the thing to remember, and this is what I'm learning as I go still, of course, because this is such a deep topic.
It is, indeed. It really is.
For developing the templates, I can have a slide layout with a picture placeholder on it. And I know the intent of this particular layout is to always have a decorative image, that is going to always be decorative. And I can, on this master layout, mark that placeholder as decorative. I can do it all I want. It's not going to carry through to the actual slide I apply that layout to. It just won't. So because of that, if you are building a presentation and you just put in a whole bunch of, blank slides and you're filling them out as you go, just know that if you have a picture placeholder with nothing in it, that's going to come up in the missing alternative text warnings. And then it's once you put in a picture, you should make sure you always either mark it as decorative or add alt text. And the alt text should just be concise and simple. Don't put like 10 paragraphs in there. It's not a novel.
Yeah. And by the way, for everyone that's not aware what the alt text for the images is, one sentence here, just to be safe and just to make sure that we cover that,
Yes, alternative text is a description of the image or icon so that people who can't see as they go through, a screen reader will pick up that description in the alt text box and read that. So if it works on charts and graphs too. So if I have this title and it reads that, it reads me the little content piece, and then the screen reader will go over to where the chart is or the graph is. You would put alt text in for the graph saying, a chart analyzing the how much people like various kinds of fruit. Yeah. If you really, really want it to take it all the way, you can add in a data table underneath it so that the screen reader will actually read the values in the chart as well. I know saying that makes a lot of people go, oh God, that's so much stuff on a slide.
Yeah. Is there a trick for that?
I want to experiment with that. I don't really know if there's a workaround because, there's the appear disappear trick. So I could take that data table and make it disappear the second the slide happens, but is the screen reader going to pick up on it? I don't know.
What if it's outside of the slide area? Is it going to read it?
It won't pick up anything outside the slide area.
Good.
Yes. Oh, let's talk about that. Because and this is a complete new way of thinking for me this week specifically. I hadn't even thought of it and I feel so dumb. I always put my slide instructions off slide on the master slides, tips and things like that, right? I hadn't even considered the person who is designing the presentation is the one with the impairment. So if I put stuff off slide on the master, as a person is designing it, they won't ever know it's there, right? If they're blind, they won't be able to see it. And you can't select it with, tabbing through things. And therefore you can't have the speak it button that's in PowerPoint. It won't read it. So I've had to figure out new ways to get all of those slide instructions in the template. It's a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
It's not easy, for sure.
No, it's really not.
Let's go quickly on the technologies that Microsoft released and already has in PowerPoint that touch on the topic of accessibility. Because, for example, for example, Sean, who joined us for the 2021 edition of the conference,
Mm-hmm.
was immediately with subtitles turned on, right?
Yes.
So that
Yes.
is obviously one of the technologies that Microsoft introduced. There was more about this, and let's jump to something like to the what else is inside of it. What else is inside of PowerPoint? I would say, except for the accessibility checker with the help of the selection pane. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So the accessibility checker I use all the time. I always try to use the subtitles thing. So the subtitles thing is really cool. So that when you are in slideshow mode, and I actually recommend this for practicing if you're giving a talk,
Yeah.
practice it with the automatic subtitles on. Um, you can set up your slide. Where's my mouse? There it is. You can set up your slideshow to always use subtitles, and then you can change the subtitle settings. So, it'll show up in your native language. Um, by default, your native language in PowerPoint is what your machine is set to. But if you know it's going to be delivered maybe, in Spain, you can manually set it to
Yeah.
Spanish. Um, and you could choose whichever microphone you want and where you want the subtitles to show, above the slide, below the slide, or as overlays. I never use overlays just because, there's stuff on the slide and I don't want it to
Yep.
inadvertently get covered, right?
Obviously.
I don't know of anybody who actually uses the overlay option. I know Nolan Hames, he uses it below the slide. I tend to use it above the slide, but that was from when I was doing stuff in person and I wanted everybody in the back of the room to see the subtitles. Whereas if I put it on the bottom and I was in person,
Yeah. You have to
back of the
take
room can't see it.
those things in consideration, right? I
Yeah.
mean, depending on where you're presenting, that will reflect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, make you
Definitely.
switch. Yeah.
And I think one of the added benefits of that one, now I know there's the new presenter coach and everything, but I love practicing with the subtitles on because if you don't notice how you speak, and we don't all notice the words that we slur together or stumble over just naturally speaking, but you can see it when PowerPoint is trying to transcribe what you're saying. And suddenly there are words that aren't actually part of the language you speak just because it's a
Yeah.
combination maybe of three words together that you always run together as you speak. So it's a great tool for practicing as well. Let's see. So those are really the two that I use all the time is the accessibility checker and the subtitles.
Yeah, they're the big ones for sure.
I haven't used any others because then I started using Bright Slide.
All right. Because of the checks that it
Because of
automates for
the
you.
automatic accept the checks. Yeah. It's I know everybody always talks about Bright Slide, and there's for good reason.
Of course, we're going to link the ad in.
Oh, there
Yeah.
is another thing you can do that's native to PowerPoint is preview your slide in grayscale,
Yeah.
and that will help if you don't have Bright Slide or to help you with that. It's a really quick check to see if, especially in charts, if your pie
Yeah.
slices are contrasting with adjacent pie slices enough. So if you view it in grayscale, you can automatically see where there might be issues. So you might have to rearrange colors. Someone does some. Oh, that might not. That's probably another Bright Slide feature.
I think that, by the way, one of the cool things and cool resources, I have to find it out and link it up in the blog article that we're going to publish together with the episode. I think there was a very interesting webinar for, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes with someone from the product group inside of PowerPoint
Mm-hmm.
who was talking about, he always speaks at the MVP Summit also about that topic. I don't remember his name, but every single time when he's talking about accessibility, it's mind-boggling. Like his understanding about accessibility, obviously because you are making the product that
Yeah.
everyone on the world uses is just phenomenal. And he showed a lot of things related, exactly as you said, the contrast ratios, the accessibility checker, obviously what happens when you have charts and the black and white mode. By the way, I learned from him about the black and white and the grayscale mode in Windows, which is super cool also. So you can flip the whole Windows, and this way you can
Oh
see
my
your slides
gosh.
also in grayscale, which is super nice.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So you just add in the search menu. You can go to just I wrote in the search field black, and there is one that says adjust color filters, which is in the settings. So adjust color filters in the settings, and you see that you can go and select color filter and apply grayscale inverted. You can check for color blindness through that too, and it's embedded in Windows, so it's super nice. Everyone,
That's so cool.
if you're on Windows, just search for color filters or just search for adjust color, and you'll
Okay.
find those. And you can test your slides, charts, everything through that, and see what someone with blindness will actually see, which is huge.
That's awesome. I'm going to try that because I normally work Mac side, but I can fire parallels up and go test that out. That's,
Yeah, I think it will work very well. Yeah, it should work. I mean, if you're running parallels, it shouldn't be a
yeah.
problem.
Oh, yeah, it should totally work.
Of course.
I wonder if Mac has to come on, Mac has to have something like that.
I think
I'll have
they
to
I
check that
think they
out.
also have that.
Yeah.
Apple followed very quickly, I would say, on that topic, like very
Yeah.
quickly, especially because of the popularity, I think, of iPads. I think that
Yes.
I think that
Oh, yeah.
iPads made that discussion in Apple huge.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's just an opinion. I'm not sure about it.
Oh, you know what? There's another thing we could talk about regarding things like audio, video, and animation.
Hmm.
Like audio and video, especially if we're speaking, those subtitles can take care of it. Auto subtitles.
Yeah.
If you're embedding video from YouTube or something, make sure you're doing it with the closed captioning on because that will be more accurate, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but when it comes to animation and transitions, and this is a part that hurts my soul a little bit because I am really hardcore animations. I love doing really cool stuff. Like Bright Carbon does really cool stuff, and Synapses Creative does really awesome things. And um, I love doing really impactful stylistic animations in PowerPoint
Hmm.
because you can do so much. However, you have to keep in mind where you're presenting, especially if you're doing a lot of virtual. And depending on where you are in the world, who your target audience is going to be, what is their bandwidth like?
Yeah.
Right. So when we're talking about accessibility, it's not just about our impairments in our bodies, it's about what kind of technology and hardware we have access to. So if
Yeah.
we have really crappy hardware and we're running on a really crappy internet connection,
Yeah.
your amazing transitions are going to freeze up, are going to cause jitters. We might miss some content.
Yeah.
So I have really scaled back. I think I overcompensated, quite frankly, for my own work, but I would rather err on the side of extreme caution. If I'm doing in person stuff, it's fine. I'll do all kinds of fun things, and I know we'll get there again someday soon. But yeah, that's another thing just to keep in mind is what is your audience watching on? I mean,
Yeah.
are they out in the middle of the country and they have one bar in their phone, but they're watching their webinar on it because, the scenery is fantastic and this is where they want their experience to be. But, you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, because we are already very close to 1 hour, which is crazy. That topic is huge. I mean, accessibility is huge, but for everyone, if we need to, correct me, Steph, if I'm wrong, but if we need to recap that, let's
Yeah.
say to people that are using PowerPoint at least, or for everyone who is not using PowerPoint to search for the alternatives here,
Mm-hmm.
hey, colors and contrast is crucial, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is crucial. Use
Yes.
the accessibility checker in PowerPoint because, by the way, the advices and the suggestions and the way the accessibility checker actually works, meaning the words they use to describe you the warnings or the issues you have are just so plain and simple, exactly
Yes.
as they should be accessible.
Yes.
So, so colors and contrast are huge. Use the accessibility checker, Figure out
Hmm.
what the selection pane is, obviously, because you need it. And then, depending on obviously the audience, if they have hearing impairments, right? Is that the
Hmm.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe then the subtitles can play a huge role, obviously, if you're
Hmm.
using Office 365, because not everybody is on Office 365, but still a lot of people are on Office
Yeah.
365. And by the way, shocker, I don't know for you, but a lot of people don't know about the subtitles. Do you notice that?
Know
Do you
about
see?
what?
A lot of people don't know that the subtitles feature exists. Have you
Oh,
noticed that?
oh, yeah. Well, it doesn't surprise me, honestly, because I, most people, and it's not because they're insensitive or, mean or
Yeah, of
anything,
course.
because you don't know about it. If you don't
Yeah,
need it, you don't think to go looking for it. So,
absolutely. Absolutely. So we always ask this question: who else should we get on the podcast? Someone from the business world, or someone from the presentation world, or just someone that made an impression on you with something related to their presentations. So
oh my gosh. Oh, there are
one name
so
only.
many.
All right, one
One
name
name
only.
only, Boris, and you've already had so many of my friends on here.
All
Ah,
right, so now it's hard. I'm writing down, so try. If
okay.
I got them on the podcast already, and even if they were on the podcast and the episode is still not published, I'll tell you. But let's get
Okay.
one name from you.
How about Sally Zimney?
I didn't have her. We didn't have her. Sally?
Sally Zimney. Zimney. Sally
All
Z.
right.
She's
Who
awesome.
is Sally? Why is she awesome?
Sally is a speaker coach.
Got it. All right.
And she is actually my speaker coach now. I resisted for a while, and now I'm like, okay, be my
Me?
speaker coach. And she's bubbly and wonderful and has all kinds of fantastic tips for, being your authentic self and connecting with audiences and things like that, finding your story. So she's amazing.
Got it. Interesting. And then one last. Sally, by the way, if you're listening to this one, I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you. So I'll find you on LinkedIn. You know how this works. So, or you are going to introduce me. Let's see which one will be
Yeah,
first.
that's true.
So let's see. One last here. Where can people find more about what you do? And second part of this question is, what is the best social media network for people to connect?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, because I'm really bad at checking. Okay, first, where we can find more about my work, you can find a lot of it at presentationguild.org, because that's been my life for the past 6 years,
Got
and
it.
my own home on the internet is presentationworkshop.com. Other than that, social media. Oy,
Which one?
I'm Stephy Hogan everywhere. So Stephy Hogan at LinkedIn. I have purple
Okay.
hair. I'm hard to miss.
Yeah. I was
Same
about
on
to ask
Twitter.
about the purple hair, but let's keep it for the next episode and let's see whether or not you will be still with purple hair up until then.
Oh
Will be
yeah. So
still
if you're wondering if you have the right Steffi Hogan, if she has purple hair, it's probably me.
that's you. All right. So LinkedIn, presentationguild.org, and presentationworkshop.com. You are very early on that domain, I would say. You are very early on that domain. That
Thank you.
domain wouldn't be available today. I mean, that is crazy. All right. Steffi, that was great. I mean, that topic about that accessibility topic is so huge. I think I think that it was like 6 or 7 months ago, I stumbled upon a document. I don't know from where, with the requirements about with the accessibility requirements, like the official document. And it was
Hmm.
like a book, like it was so
Yeah.
detailed. It's crazy, huge topic. But again, for
Yes.
everyone who is listening to this one, coming from the business world, coming from the design world, whatever, you will be asked to create accessible content. I mean, very soon. If you haven't done it already, you will be asked. So you better Google that topic. Ask
Yeah.
Steffi on, a little bit about the topic. She will help. I think, hopefully, she'll help you. Meaning, she won't see the message and say, "I don't care."
No, I don't usually say that.
All right, something else. Good. All right, so she will be helping out. If you have any question on the topic, I think that would be great for everyone to ask on social media. I'll make sure that we tag Steffi in the question so that she is also seeing it. Steffi, thanks so much again for doing this. That was that was fun, and that topic is important, I think.
Thanks, Boris. Yeah, I'm glad we got to talk about it, and yeah, it's something that you could do a whole workshop on it all day. It's crazy.
Yep.
It's so big.
Presentation workshop. Yeah, but that was the main. Anyway, so thank you so much for joining, and for everyone, check out what Steffi is doing at the Presentation Guild. Obviously, presentationworkshop.com. Find her on LinkedIn. Also, check us on our website 356labs.com. And if you still don't know about the presentation conference, Present to Succeed, check that one too. It's coming up again on the 7th and 8th of April 2022. And by the way, Steffi, to end this one, I don't know if you cannot know this. Obviously, we still haven't started the heavy work and a lot of the things related to the podcast, related to the conference. But interesting fact, this is the episode, and I went with this one. This episode that we're recording right now is the second to the last one that we're recording in this office. The second to the last one. So there is one more today that I need to record, and it's over. So that background behind me.
New office? That's exciting.
Yeah, we'll be moving to a new office, and the day is our last day here. So this is the only room that still has few things here and there. You know, the logo is still there, stuff like that. So, anyway, again, thanks for joining, and hopefully everyone enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, share with people, because again, this topic is truly important, and a lot more people need to hear about it. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you in the next one.